At exactly 0611 hours local time on Sunday, May 17, 2026, in the Al Dhafra Desert region of Abu Dhabi, the most dangerous military incident of the 21st century nearly became the most catastrophic. 3 Iranian-linked drones crossed the UAE's western border at low altitude, hugging the desert floor beneath the scan arc of ground-based air defense radars, threading the detection gap between the UAE's Patriot PAC-3 batteries and the shorter-range Crotal systems positioned to protect the surrounding military infrastructure. 2 of the 3 drones were intercepted. The third was not. It slammed into an electrical generator housed outside the inner perimeter of the Barakah Nuclear Energy Plant, the Arabian Peninsula's first and only nuclear power station, and detonated on impact, igniting a fire that burned for 41 minutes while the world held its breath and prayed that the wind was blowing in the right direction. There were no casualties. Radiation levels remained normal. The IAEA confirmed that all 4 reactor units were operating without interruption. And yet, in every defense ministry, every nuclear regulatory agency, and every intelligence directorate on the planet, the same calculation was running simultaneously. 1 meter closer, 1 warhead slightly larger, 1 targeting algorithm slightly better calibrated, and the Arabian Gulf becomes the site of humanity's first deliberate radiological attack on a civilian nuclear facility. Iran had just fired a warning shot at a nuclear power plant, and the warning shot had connected. This did not happen in a vacuum. Sunday's strike was not an isolated provocation. It was the latest escalation in a conflict that had already reshaped the strategic architecture of the entire Middle East since February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched Operation Roaring Lion, a coordinated multi-domain strike campaign targeting Iranian military installations, nuclear facilities, and regime infrastructure across the breadth of the Islamic Republic. The opening strikes of Roaring Lion killed 3 Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps generals, destroyed 2 of the 3 known centrifuge halls at the Fordow enrichment facility buried beneath 80 meters of granite mountain, and severed the command and control links between the Iranian Ministry of Defense and the dispersed missile brigades of the IRGC Aerospace Force. Iran's response was immediate and multi-vector. Hundreds of ballistic missiles and Shahed series drones rained down on Israel, on U.S. forward operating bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait, and on the civilian infrastructure of the Gulf states that had permitted American forces to stage from their soil. The UAE, which hosts Al Dhafra Air Base, home to the F-35A squadrons of the 381st Air Expeditionary Wing, and the most capable ISR architecture in the CENTCOM area of operations, absorbed the first wave of Iranian retaliation on the night of March 1st. 11 ballistic missiles intercepted by Patriot, 3 Shahed drones destroyed by the SHORAD network, and 1 cruise missile that punched through the layered defense and destroyed a fuel depot 4 kilometers from the runway threshold at Al Dhafra. A conditional ceasefire was brokered on April 8th, mediated through back channels in Oman and Pakistan. It lasted 19 days. On April 27th, Iran resumed strikes on the Emirates, targeting the desalination plants at Jebel Ali and the port infrastructure at Khalifa Port. The UAE intercepted the majority of the incoming weapons, but the message was unmistakable. The ceasefire was a weapon Iran was using to reload, not a genuine cessation of hostilities. By May 10th, the conflict had re-entered full kinetic mode. Iranian fast attack craft were interdicting commercial shipping in the northern Gulf. IRGC coastal batteries were illuminating U.S. Navy destroyers in the Strait of Hormuz with fire control radar. Iranian proxy forces in Yemen, the remnants of the Houthi military structure that had survived 2 years of coalition airstrikes, were launching long-range ballistic missiles at Saudi Arabia's Eastern Province oil infrastructure. And somewhere in the IRGC's Drone Warfare Command, a targeting officer was entering the GPS coordinates of the Barakah Nuclear Energy Plant into the terminal guidance system of a Shahed 136 variant, modified for ultra-low altitude terrain following flight. The Barakah plant sits in the Al Dhafra region of Abu Dhabi, roughly 270 kilometers southwest of the city center, in the featureless expanse of the Rub al-Khali Desert. It consists of 4 APR-1400 pressurized water reactors, South Korean designed and built by KEPCO, each capable of generating 1,400 megawatts of electrical power. Together, the 4 units supply approximately 25% of the UAE's total electricity demand, the equivalent of Switzerland's entire national grid, and displace 22.4 million metric tons of carbon emissions annually. Since Unit 1 entered commercial operation in 2021, the plant has been recognized as one of the most safely operated nuclear facilities in the world outside of Western Europe. It is also, as every military planner in CENTCOM, the IDF, and the British Defence Intelligence Staff understood the moment Operation Roaring Lion was launched, the single most strategically valuable target in the Arabian Peninsula that Iran could threaten without triggering an immediate nuclear response from the United States. A radiological release from Barakah, driven by the prevailing winds across the UAE coastal corridor, would contaminate Abu Dhabi and Dubai, the financial and commercial capitals of the Gulf, and render them uninhabitable for decades. It would destroy the sovereign wealth funds, the financial architecture, the port infrastructure, and the aviation hubs that constitute the economic backbone of the entire Arab world's modernization project. And it would do all of this without Iran detonating a single nuclear weapon, shielding Tehran from the full weight of American retaliatory doctrine, while achieving a strategic outcome that no conventional military campaign could replicate. This was not a secret. The Barakah plant's existence as Iran's most powerful potential leverage point in the conflict had been the subject of classified threat assessments circulated through the Five Eyes intelligence network since the autumn of 2025. The UAE's Federal Authority for Nuclear Regulation had conducted extensive vulnerability assessments in coordination with the IAEA's Division of Nuclear Security, identifying the plant's external electrical infrastructure, the transformer yards, diesel generator buildings, and high-voltage switching stations positioned outside the hardened inner perimeter as the most accessible, high-value target for a standoff drone or missile attack that could disrupt plant operations without penetrating the reactor containment structures themselves. These assessments had been shared with the UAE Ministry of Defense and incorporated into the Barakah Integrated Force Protection Plan, a joint civilian-military security architecture that ringed the plant with a multi-layer air defense network. Patriot, PAC, 3 MSE batteries positioned to engage ballistic threats at altitude. Crotal NG, short-range air defense systems optimized for low-flying subsonic threats, and a ring of SHORAD gun missile systems providing point defense of the hardened structures. The plan had assumed that any attacker would use a single, high-value guided weapon. It had not adequately modeled a 3-drone saturation attack, in which the first 2 weapons were deliberately sacrificed to exhaust the SHORAD engagement cycles, clearing the lane for the 3rd drone to penetrate to the external infrastructure layer. At 0607 hours on May 17th, the UAE's Air Defense Sensor Network, a fusion of ground-based radars, aerostat-mounted AESA sensors, and feeds from the Predator Sea Avenger UAV that CENTCOM maintains on a continuous orbit over the northern Gulf, simultaneously painted 3 low-observable targets crossing the western border at an altitude of approximately 30 meters, a speed of 185 kilometers per hour, and a magnetic bearing of 073 degrees, precisely aligned with the Barakah plant's coordinates. The threat classification algorithm on the integrated air picture at UAE Air Defense Headquarters in Abu Dhabi designated the contacts as Priority Air Track 001, 002, and 003 within 4 seconds of first detection. Weapons-free authority was passed to the Crotal NG battery commander at Barakah Site Alpha at 060814. The first Crotal VT-1 missile left its launcher at 060822 and destroyed PAT-001 at a range of 6,200 meters. The second missile was away at 060831, killing PAT-002 at 5,800 meters in a fireball of burning composite airframe and lithium polymer battery cells. PAT-003 had already begun its terminal dive. It had dropped to 12 meters altitude, below the minimum engagement envelope of the Crotal's radar tracker, which had been optimized for targets above 15 meters to avoid ground clutter false returns, and was running at full throttle on a flat approach vector toward the generator building at Barakah's eastern perimeter. The SHORAD gunners on the eastern watch post acquired it visually at 06:08:47. They did not have time to complete a manual engagement. PAT-003 impacted the diesel generator housing at 06:08:52 and detonated its 50-kilogram blast fragmentation warhead. The explosion tore apart the generator structure, ignited 400 liters of diesel fuel stored in the on-site tank, and sent a column of black smoke rising 200 meters into the desert sky, visible on satellite imagery within 9 minutes from a commercial Planet Labs Dove satellite on its morning pass. Emergency diesel generators, redundant backup power systems that the APR-1400 design requires to be maintained in ready start condition at all times, automatically assumed the electrical load for Unit 3, which had been drawing power from the damaged generator string. The reactor itself was never in any danger. The containment structure of an APR-1400, built from 1.2 meter thick pre-stressed concrete reinforced with carbon fiber rebar, is designed to withstand the direct impact of a fully fueled Boeing 767 without breach. A 50-kilogram drone warhead detonating 340 meters from the reactor building produced a peak overpressure at the containment wall of approximately 0.003 bars, roughly the force of a strong gust of wind. The UAE's Federal Authority for Nuclear Regulation confirmed at 0730 hours that all 4 reactor units were operating normally, that radiation monitoring at 12 perimeter stations showed no deviation from baseline, and that the plant's safety systems had not been activated in emergency mode. None of that changed the strategic reality. The IAEA's Director General Rafael Grossi was on a secure line to UAE Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed within 20 minutes of the strike, expressing, in the measured language of international nuclear diplomacy, what his public statement would later describe as grave concern. In his phone call with Sheikh Abdullah, Grossi stated explicitly that military activity targeting or threatening nuclear facilities was unacceptable under international law and constituted a violation of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons' implicit prohibitions on the deliberate endangerment of civilian nuclear infrastructure. Sheikh Abdullah's response, relayed to the IAEA and simultaneously transmitted to the UN Security Council, described the strike as a treacherous terrorist attack that constituted a dangerous escalation, an unacceptable act of aggression, and a direct threat, and stressed the UAE's full right to respond to these terrorist attacks and to take all necessary measures to protect its security, territorial integrity, and citizens in accordance with international law. Every lawyer who parsed that statement understood what all necessary measures meant in the context of international armed conflict doctrine. It was not a diplomatic formulation, it was a legal predicate for retaliation. No one immediately claimed responsibility. That silence was itself a message, calculated with the precision of a chess grandmaster. The UAE announced that its Ministry of Defense was investigating the origin of the 3 drones, noting that all 3 had crossed the western border, a direction that pointed not toward Iranian territory across the Gulf, but toward Yemen, where the IRGC's drone transfer networks had spent 2 years pre-positioning weapons through the Houthi logistics infrastructure. The ambiguity was deliberate. Iran had constructed a deniability architecture around this attack, identical to the one it had used for the 2019 Abqaiq Qurayz oil processing facility strikes. Weapons launched from or through proxy territory. No direct Iranian fingerprint on the airframes. A targeting solution achievable by any of 4 different IRGC-aligned non-state actors in the region. The attribution problem was not technical. American signals intelligence, CENTCOM's overhead imagery architecture, and the track data from the Predator-C aerostat had already assembled a kill chain that pointed unambiguously toward an IRGC Aerospace Force launch authority. The attribution problem was political. Every nation that chose to formally attribute this strike to Tehran was choosing to escalate a conflict that had already cost thousands of lives and shut down 1/5 of global oil supply. And every nation that chose not to attribute it was signaling that attacking a nuclear power plant carried no consequence as long as you used a proxy to pull the trigger. At 1400 hours Washington time, President Trump was scheduled to speak by secure video link with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Stalled negotiations over a comprehensive Iran ceasefire framework had been the planned subject. As of the moment that drone struck the Barakah generator building, the agenda had changed. The question on the table was no longer how to end the 2026 Iran war. The question was whether the attack on Barakah had just made ending it impossible. Because the precedent established this morning in the Al Dhafra desert was not a military precedent, it was a civilizational one. For the first time in the history of armed conflict, a state-sponsored actor had deliberately targeted an operating civilian nuclear power plant with a precision-guided munition, and the warhead had landed exactly where it was aimed. The engineering tolerances had been insufficient. The defense had failed in its final layer. And the lesson that every irregular armed force on Earth was downloading from Barakah's burning generator building was the same lesson. Nuclear power plants are targetable. Nuclear power plants are vulnerable. Nuclear power plants are leverage. That lesson cannot be unlearned. It cannot be classified, suppressed, or diplomatically managed back into irrelevance. The physical and legal architecture of international nuclear security, the IAEA safeguards regime, the additional protocol verification framework, the entire normative structure built on the assumption that civilian nuclear infrastructure was implicitly protected from deliberate military attack, was built for a world in which the threat was accidental release, not intentional strike. Sunday's attack at Barakah did not cause a nuclear disaster. It proved that the next one might. What happens to the global nuclear energy industry? The industry that 60 nations are counting on to deliver carbon-free electricity through the second half of this century. The morning that a reactor breach is caused by an intentional attack rather than a hardware failure. What country builds the next nuclear power plant on a coastline that any drone operator with a GPS coordinate and a 50-kilogram warhead can target? What bank finances it? What insurer underwrites it? The economic and psychological consequences of Barakah were not measured in radiation counts. They were measured in the silence that fell over every nuclear energy boardroom on Earth at the moment the smoke footage went live on satellite television. Iran had aimed a drone at a nuclear power plant and hit what it aimed at. The 3 centimeters of clearance between that warhead and a global catastrophe were not a safety margin. They were a warning. And the most dangerous question hanging over the Arabian Gulf tonight is not whether America will respond, or how the UAE will retaliate, or whether the Iran ceasefire can be salvaged from the wreckage of this morning's strike. What would you do if you were in the Situation Room right now? Comment below, because the decision that gets made in the next 72 hours will determine whether May 17th, 2026 is remembered as the day Iran went too far, or the day that no one stopped them from going further. Stay sharp, stay informed, and never forget that the rules of the global order are written by those willing to enforce them. Because right now, in the Al Dhafra desert, the smoke is still rising, and nobody has blinked yet.